Work session to order.
Okay, here we go. We're back in wonderful world of policy again. So they released about 24 policies, and I'm cutting it in thirds, about 8 each night. And here's our first round. BBAA is a policy that has a piece in it related to the board superintendent authority, relationship, and responsibilities. I'm going to let Jeff tell you about that.
So basically, this is just a recognition. This stuff that's in here is state law anyway. That's why it's it's technically an optional policy, but all the stuff that's in here is pretty much exactly what your guys' relationship are. So if you want to do it, you can. If you don't want to do it, those are the rules you have to live under anyway. So it might be a nice reference guide if you want to adopt it, but it's not mandatory. Basically, everything that's in there is either case law or statutorily required. So that's the basics of it.
The big thing he offers in paragraph 4. No individual board member may direct the superintendent to action without board authorization. So,
and the big thing with that is you guys can't do that anyway because board members can't act on their own unless they're delegated as a committee. So it's, again, it's state law. I mean, you guys act collectively when you do stuff through a vote. So that's just a standardized. So again, it comes down to this is state law. If you want to adopt it, you can. If you don't want to adopt it, it's still requirements you live under. So it's up to you.
that's the recommendation I placed you to at your discretion. Questions, conversation?
Well, I mean, if it's just restating law, I guess it's just if the law were to change, it's just another policy to change.
Pretty much. And you have a lot of those already. I mean, it's just so it would be another one that you would have to keep updated on a regular basis. But this is, like I said, this is based on the law. But then again, OSBA will do it for us, so it's kind of again, it's fully your guys' discretion at this point.
Do you guys have any preference?
I don't care one way or the other.
I don't either.
I don't either. I don't think it matters one way or the other.
Can you feel our passion?
Yeah, I can feel your passion. It's oozing.
Honestly, if nobody feels strongly about it, then don't do it. It's not gonna hurt anything if you don't.
So shall we go do not adopt?
Okay.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't have to look at it next year.
Fair enough.
It'll be back.
They're always back.
Okay, ECACB, it's, once again, we've now visited this, I believe, for the third time in the last year. The manned aircraft system, which is the use of drones. Well, we haven't executed a drone program at Lakeview High School, down in Williston, or any of our schools as of yet, but we've put the policy in place should we go to some sort of drone instruction. There's two parts to this thing. It talks about the student maintaining operational control of the model aircraft, such that the staff members manipulate. I had to ask Jeff about this one the other day. Staff members' manipulation of model aircraft's controls is incidental and secondary to the students. So what's your take on that again?
Oh, what that means is that the student's got to be for us to be using drones, the student has to be the primary person operating. They need to be steering it, they need to be running it up and down, otherwise there's extra permitting we have to get. So to fall in under some of those exemptions, which are referenced at the bottom of this policy, that's how it has to operate. So it's worded poorly, but I wouldn't change the wording because it's a lot of quotations directly out of federal acts and CFRs and U.S. code, states code, so I wouldn't reinvent the wheel. So that's what that means. Basically, instructor can get students how to figure out how to fly drones and everything else. But when it's going to be part of the curriculum, the student's got to be the primary mover and shaker. Of course, an administrator can step in if you've got a student that's going to decide to try to make the drone do a suicide attack on the top of the building or something like that. But otherwise, this is the student's deal. It's just like being in driver's ed. You might be in the passenger seat, but ultimately, you don't grab the wheel unless something serious happens. So it's kind of the same idea. And it's one that probably needs to be adopted if you want to allow drone stuff.
It is required.
Yep.
Furthermore, they've added the ODA, the Oregon Department of Aviation, as another regulatory authority to it. That's the other.
Yep.
Questions on that? Okay, we go to GBDA. They've eliminated the one mother-friendly workplace policy. And they've added a new GBDA, mother-friendly workplace. This policy, we have to spell out locations for milk delivery and breastfeeding. What specific locations in the district highlighted, as you can see in your policy, we have specified every building in the district as an area for milk delivery, breastfeeding, and so on. One thing they say in the policy is you cannot use restrooms. So I had to get the principals and we had to go through and designate rooms throughout the district in that regard. So that's that policy.
Yeah.
Questions on
And there
that?
have to be private rooms too, right?
Yeah.
Not like the break room.
No. private
Correct.
rooms, yeah.
Correct.
All these rooms designated are private rooms with,
Mhm.
window coverings and everything else, so.
The other issue with this is technically the only thing that actually has to be by law mandated is just the list of places. The other parts of the policy are optional, but they're again restatements of the law, so you might as well just adopt the entire policy. It's not technically mandatory except for the part about what locations we've designated, and that has to be at a district policy level by state law.
Questions on that? GBE, BA, staff HIV, AIDS, and HBV. I think back when AIDS was at an area of critical mass, it first came out, there's a sentence in here, a paragraph, that established committees to address the nature, the duration, the severity of risk, as well as and the modification of activities related to any type of HIV incident. As you can see, that language has been scratched from the policy. In addition to the last sentence in the policy says the district shall also develop policies and procedures for rumor control, infection, and public relations and media. So I think over time where the incidence and level of AIDS is, somewhat decreased and everything, that I believe is the reason why those two pieces of language have been removed from this policy. As far as this policy goes, it is not required, it is highly recommended. Questions or thoughts on that?
And from a legal standpoint, this is how this is being treated now. We know a lot more about AIDS and a lot of the other things. They have, anybody that's had first aid training now, this is dealing with blood and these kind of pathogens is a standard protocol, so a lot of these issues that had needed specialized stuff have been addressed, and just current updates and training and certifications that teachers and staff have to get. So a lot of this has just become unnecessary with advances in medicine, and the law is reflecting that.
It even goes to supermarkets.
Right.
I grew up in Whole Foods and they were like, no, the born pathogen person has to come.
Yep.
I was like, but I can.
Nope.
They're like, oh no. I mean, there was a protocol. For
Exactly. No, and again, we recognize AIDS now as more of like a long-term illness, like long-term cancer, or other chronic conditions. So it's much more manageable. Much stigma's gone. So they don't need the specialized procedures anymore. So I would recommend you adopt it.
I do too. So we move on, questions? Okay.
Oh, just one. Do we have a designated person in each building that is supposed to deal with those type of messes? Or, do we have someone that's specially trained or?
Bobby does the training during in-service.
Yeah.
She goes over all that with the entire
So
staff.
anyone is.
So
can
we all
clean up
actually know how.
Those type of messes. It isn't like you
It's in
have.
policy, and we go through it every year in service too.
And there's kits everywhere, and every building knows their location and what have you.
I was just curious
Yeah.
if we had
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
person
Good
that
question.
we're dependent upon or.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, that doesn't really work with kids' situations because there's just too many places where it needs to be dealt with
Gotcha.
right now, and you can't just have one staff member do it because they could be halfway across the town. So
Okay, GBH, JECAC, students, staff, student, parent relations. Basically addressing the, topic of custodial, non-custodial parents and their access to student records. By this policy, both the custodial parent and non-custodial parent have full access to review records. If there's a call, say at school, and they can't reach the custodial parent related to an illness thing, or they need to go to the doctor or whatever, this permits the non-custodial parent to also be fine to do that, to make that decision. The only thing that it adds in here, which we certainly follow all the time, is if there's a court order in there specifying that the non-custodial parent is not to have any contact in any way, form, or fashion. So I think it's very straightforward. It's the kind of the world we live in, and like I said, it recognizes both the custodial and the non-custodial parent in a fair way as far as being able to access students' records, the health part of the situation and everything else, so.
And it is exactly in line with the state custody statutes related to that this is the default unless the court says otherwise. And to authorize otherwise usually requires things like one parent's been inappropriate or something like that. The only other time that this can vary is if there's a joint custody, and sometimes parents will specifically split up decision-making authority, where this person is maybe responsible for religious stuff, this person's responsible for educational decisions, and then you follow that. You see more of that out of like California custody orders and stuff like that than you would in Oregon. But it is there, and we will follow whichever a judge or custody order does. Because that's, especially with the joint custody, that's parties have agreed to that for the most part. So
I think it's very well worded, and it really speaks to what we as administrators, deal with as far as addressing the needs of both custodial and non-custodial parents. So I would move to adopt. Questions? You're an easy bunch to please tonight, I'll tell you. We're on G, B, and A, hazing, harassment, intimidation, bullying, menacing, or cyberbullying. Specifically, this policy is addressing, areas of retaliation, related to if a student reports another student retaliates against them, that strict policy will be enforced as far as discipline related to student retaliation, or even, in this case, employee retaliation too. So basically, it's a retaliation protection clause in case a student does the right thing, reports an incident, and shouldn't feel the blowback of another student retaliating against it in that sense. Jeff, anything to add?
no, and that's state law anyway. So I believe it's a mandatory policy
Yeah.
to adopt, and it's I think also just doing some simplification as well of some things. They've removed some things, just tweaked some things around, and then updated some statutory references. But it's standard and needs to be there. It's state law.
Questions on that? Okay. The next one's an AR. It has basically made some wording changes in the definitions. Specifically hazing, it's eliminated a lot of language in the area of hazing and shortened that up. Go ahead.
Can we go back to the last one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
The second to the last paragraph, individuals may also be referred to law enforcement officials, licensed staff, and it says may be reported to Teacher Standards and Practice Commission if required by OAR. That's not a may. If it's required by OAR, then it's a will.
Exactly. I didn't like that either, but they wanted to make the change, I guess, to.
Well, yeah, that caught my eye too, and I don't understand why they did that, because in all our training sessions, the DHS, it's always you will report.
Well, and this is
So-
this is licensed staff violating of these type of standards, and it's under those subsections of that particular OAR. Some of the big list of nasty stuff that staff can't do. So, but you're right, it is a required thing, and I wish they'd left it alone, but they're recommending the change, so it is clumsy language. I will give you that, because the reality, if that OAR is there, then you have to follow it.
Well, if it's required, then it's not.
Yeah.
No.
It's saying that we may or may not follow the OAR.
It's kind of contradicting itself.
Okay.
Want me to question it when I submit?
Yeah, please do.
I would. I think that's just. I don't like stuff where it makes it sound like it's one thing and it's something else. That isn't good. It's not. very good drafting.
So the other thing on those, and granted I can't see, but I think it says for school district 1 instead of 7.
Yeah, Tom?
Yeah. That needs to be changed too.
It's on a couple of them.
The top, it's listing a school district.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on the
Next
age
page 2.
policy.
It's like it's on all of it
Yeah.
as they came
Good point.
through.
Yep.
It's just because I have it magnified.
Right.
Good job, Corey.
I think that's really a word.
Okay, good catches. Back to GBNAAR. Harassment, a new definition or a modified definition to basically speak to unwelcome conduct is based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin. It spells out all the different protected classes that can be the target of harassment. So that's a change there.
The other thing that it did is it pulled out the retaliation section and puts that, those are being put in their own subsections, because that retaliation stuff that was addressed in the last policy was just a single paragraph in this one originally, on the second page.
Number 6 on cyberbullying. It's a world that we as administrators are dealing more and more and more with all the time, with all the social media and all that. They've added a paragraph there, in addition to any communication of this form which substantially disrupts or prevents a safe and positive working environment may also be considered cyberbullying, harass, intimidate, or bully. Staff will refrain from using personal electronic devices or district equipment to harass or stalk another person or people. You want to weigh in on that one, Jeffrey?
Unfortunately, that is the world we live in, and you would think people would realize by this point that using official equipment to do stuff like this is not a good idea, and unfortunately, they don't. You see it all the time, sending a mass email, calling somebody a name or something along those lines, or stalking them or whatever when something gets inappropriate. And so you want it in your policy to make sure that, one, we take steps so we don't get sued for what an employee is doing with our stuff, and number 2, that's some of the mechanisms they're using. So I think it's a necessary update, unfortunately, with the state of play that we're in for this area.
Okay, the rest of it is just basically routine, regular language that we've seen before. I will take your attention to the last paragraph on page 30. We had to make a choice as far as if there's any reports against the board chair related to issues of harassment, complaints, or anything as such. We had to distinguish between district council or vice chair. It originally said board chair, but that was a mistake on OSBA's part. It should go to the vice chair if there's a complaint about the board chair. Then it says the board vice chair shall present the report to the board if, next page, the board decides an investigation is warranted. The board may refer the investigation to a third party. So that's basically the thing I needed to point out to you on that, related to complaints against the board chair.
And part of the reason that I had myself removed, not as district council, is I need to be able to represent you guys, and if I do the investigation or if I'm receiving the complaint, I become a witness and I can't be the attorney for the situation. So ethical rules prohibit me from them being involved in that process. So it's better that it comes to another board member and then it goes through that process. And most of the time, if there is an issue like this pops up, hopefully that never happens, that should be probably kicked over to a third party, just so that way you are able to then make a decision based on what happened. Because if a board member does the investigation, that person can't vote. And obviously neither can the board chair who's been accused. So it's a good process and the only real workable way that I see it ever working if this issue ever does come up.
Okay, that's where we wrap up for tonight. We'll go back and any more questions or comments? So I will bring them to you in the form of a consent agenda item next meeting, and with the amendment, the BBAA will be no action.
Okay.
Okay. That's it.
So I guess we will take a break here for 7 minutes.
Yeah.